Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me in my new message today. In today's message, I want to talk about the topic of making God the number one priority over our lives. Because during these times, whether we have a job or we go to school, whether it be high school or college, and it seems that we have all this important work piling up all around us, and we have all these important events that we need to attend to, it can seem really hard in the chaos of all that to really make God the number one priority over our lives. Or even when we have the free time and when we have the time that we should be spending towards God, we don't, because we don't have a close enough relationship with Him, and we don't make God the number one priority over our lives. But in today's message, I want to talk about 3 ways that we can make God the number one priority over our lives. And I want to focus on these 3 ways. And the first way we can do this is by prioritizing God's will for our lives over our own. Because I want to show this more clearly in Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. They are very well-known verses, but they are very practical for our Christian lives. And I want to read this where it says in Proverbs 3 verses 5, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths." So we can clearly see here that Solomon, the writer of Proverbs, is emphasizing that we should trust in the Lord with all our heart and we should not lean on our own understanding. And I want to read another passage in Isaiah chapter 59 verses 8 to 9, which contrasts more about our understanding for our own lives and God's understanding for our own lives. And I want to read this passage, which is very powerful, in which God is speaking to Isaiah in Isaiah 55 verses 8 to 9. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So we can see that God's thoughts for our lives is higher than our thoughts, and His ways for our lives is higher than our ways. And we can always trust in the Lord, and we should not lean on our own understanding. And we can also trust in the Lord because His wisdom is far greater than our own wisdom. Because it says, and this is emphasized in 1 Corinthians 1 verses 25, where Paul says, "Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." So because God's wisdom is far greater than our own wisdom, and because His thoughts are greater than our thoughts and His ways are greater than our ways, we should always prioritize His will for our lives over our own. And that's why we should always trust in the Lord. And He will, says in Proverbs 3 verses 6, He says that He will make our path straight if we trust in the Lord and not lean on our own understanding. And we also get this assurance in Jeremiah 29 verses 11, where God says to Jeremiah, "I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans not to harm you, but plans to prosper you." And since we have that assurance that God's plans for our lives are not to harm us, but they are to prosper us, we should always prioritize His will for our lives over our own. And that is how we can make God a number one priority over our life. And the second way we can make God the number one priority over our life is by giving our full devotion to Him. And I want to show this also more clearly by reading another passage from Luke 14 verses 26 to 27. And a great multitude is hearing Jesus as He is preaching, and He is talking about the true cost of discipleship. And I want to read this in Luke 14 verses 26, where He says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." So first, this passage could come off as harsh, like, is Jesus really saying that we should hate our own family and then only we can be His disciple? No, Jesus is not saying that, but later in this passage, He tells a story about a man who is building a tower, but he estimates the cost of the tower before he even lays the foundation, and therefore when he is building the tower, he completely runs out of money, and the tower is left unfinished because he underestimated the cost of the tower. And we can see here through that example that Jesus is more clearly emphasizing the cost of discipleship. That if we are to follow Jesus, we need to put Him over everything else. We need to give our full devotion to Him and put Him over everything in this world. And we need to give our full devotion to Him. And it says in verse 27, "And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." So we can give our full devotion to Him by bearing our cross, by putting Him above everything in this world. And when we do this, when we give our full devotion to Him, we truly make God the number one priority over our lives. And now the third way we can make God the number one priority over our lives is by loving God with all our heart. And I want to read another passage from Matthew 22:37 verses 38. And to give some context, there were some Pharisees sitting around Jesus, and they were asking Him questions. And then one of them, who was a lawyer, stood up and asked Jesus, "What is the greatest commandment of all?" And Jesus replies in a powerful response in verses 37. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment." So we can see here that this is so powerful because in our own lives, we spend time with the people we love, whether it be family, our cousins, or even our friends. If we love them, we want to spend time with them, we want to have conversations with them, and we want to spend long times with them. But Jesus is saying here that the first and greatest commandment is that we should love the Lord, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And if we love God, we would then really spend time in His presence. If we love Him, then we would want to spend time in prayer, spend time in worship, and listening to what He wants for our lives. And that is very powerful to know. And that is very powerful to listen to, because if we love the Lord over everything else, as we discussed earlier, if we give our full devotion to Him, we can only give our full devotion to Him if we really love Him. And if even more, if we love the earthly people in this world and we want to spend time with them, how much more should we love the God of heaven and earth and want to spend more time with them? So I hope you were able to get a lot from this message on the 3 ways that we could be able to make God the number one priority over our lives by prioritizing His will for our lives over our own because He knows more than us, or by giving our full devotion to Him and by putting Him above everything else in this world, and by loving God. And if we love God, we would want to spend more time with Him. So I hope you were able to get a lot from this message and this message was able to touch you, and I'll see you in this next message.